Assassin's Creed. It's a series that everyone knows, whether you've actually played the games or not. It's just a testament to the amount of fanfare and the amount of mainstream attention that it's received. And let's not see it like it hasn't earned all of that either. It's a game that has shown vast longevity and diversity, and whether you love the games or hate them, you can't even argue that it doesn't deserve its place on the upper echelons of gaming's totem pole. But not all games are created equal, and that's doubly true in the case of Assassin's Creed. It ranges from amazing, providing almost endless replayability and memories that you'll want to cherish, to downright terrible, so much so that not only do you want your money back after playing them, but you want someone to pay you in compensation for the trauma that you just put yourself through. So what we're here to do today is separate the good from the bad, from the downright ugly, in the style of the good old-fashioned, totally original, totally not overdone tier list. And yes, this is all my opinion and my take on all these games, so if you don't agree with a certain game's placement, feel free to go down in the comments and say what a hairy idiot I really am because a certain game isn't higher or lower than you want it. Because your opinions will definitely have a vast impact on mine. Let's start off with, of course, Assassin's Creed 1. What do I even say about this game? There's not much to talk about, other than the fact that yeah, it's the first game. It's so just not even depressing just to look at, but it's so bare bones. And while it may have been state of the art in 2007, this is 2020. We're a spoiled bunch these days, aren't we? And even saying that it's state of the art is still a stretch, because when you look at in comparison to Assassin's Creed 2, which only came out about a year after, it's leaps and bounds. It doesn't feel like it's in the same series. And trying to go back to this game in 2020 is just asking for a bad time. Especially when you've been spoiled by all the stuff that the newer games have to offer. Trust me, I haven't done it, but I know a friend that's done it. You don't want to know what it's done to him as a person. Everything about this game just feels bland and just bleh. From the atmosphere to the setting to the characters. None of them are downright terrible. Just not much to talk about. And even if they were terrible, they'll give me more to talk about, and I'll always have some fun making fun of them. I'll try not to just rehash everything I said in my Assassin's Creed 1 retrospective video, and if you have watched that, you know exactly where it's going to go anyway. But yeah, it's just all I can really say about this game, without going into a 17-minute long rant about it. So, all that being said, cutting it some slack there, because it is the first game, and with the benefit of hindsight, somehow Ubisoft would have made worse games than this in the future, so it looks a bit better by comparison. So with all that being said, and all in all, I can't really put it any higher than C tier, so with that, I'm going to give it a 4.7, which puts it in B tier. Assassin's Creed 2. This is where it really got going. This is where the series really started picking up steam. Or, as I would put it, it's where it found its feet. I could stand here and sing the praises about this game, just like everyone else does in this Assassin's Creed community and is still doing, and that I've been guilty of in my retrospective video, which again I'm going to try not to rehash. But I'll just start it out by boldly saying it's not as good as you remember it. Much like Assassin's Creed 1, trying to go back to this game in 2020 is just asking for a bad time and tainted memories. This one I can say with personal experience. This game did add many additions to the Assassin's Creed formula that it desperately needed. Namely, a good protagonist, which I could stand here and just sing the songs and praises about how good Ezio is as a protagonist and how influential he was to the series. but I think the 3 back-to-back games that he's been in can do it for me. Again, I'm going to keep this one short. If you want to hear me go in depth, I mean, my Assassin's Creed 2 retrospective is a link in the description. But with all its noticeable flaws, I can't bring myself to put it in S tier. Sorry. But it does get a nice 9.2 out of 10, which puts it right at the top of A tier. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. This game does not get the love it deserves. While it is very similar in terms of feel and atmosphere to Assassin's Creed 2, this game feels so much more refined and polished, especially on the gameplay front. While the story of Assassin's Creed 2 may get more praise, this game is so much more replayable and just more in-depth on the gameplay front. And even talking about the story, let's not sit here and argue that Cesare Borgia from Brotherhood isn't still the best antagonist the series has ever seen. I think the key to this is, unlike its older brother, this game still holds up in 2020. I was playing through it not too long ago, and since making my retrospective video, I can now confidently double down on those points that I made. It felt fun. It didn't feel like it came out in 2010. And much like I said in my retrospective video, I'm just going to say it again. This game is a more polished, better tuned, and more refined Assassin's Creed 2. And I still don't know why it doesn't get more love. A lot of people will say that Assassin's Creed 2 is still better than Brotherhood and deserves to be placed higher. That's because those people are nostalgic and stupid. I think it's just clear as day that Brotherhood is the better alternative and is by far the best of the classic Assassin's Creed games. This is the game for the purists. And while later on in this video, me and those purists aren't going to agree on some of my rankings of some games, but I think they can agree with me on this one. With that being said, much like in my retrospective, this game gets a nice 9.4 out of 10, which puts it right at the top in S tier. Assassin's Creed Revelations. If I could just start off by describing this game in just one word, I would say that one word would be complacent. This is the first game in the series that really felt like regression rather than progression. The gameplay really does feel like a watered down, lesser version of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, and the story pales in comparison to the previous 2 games. We see Ezio yet again, and yes, Ezio is a really good character and still the face of the series. We didn't need to see him again. And the story this time doesn't have us fighting for revenge or fighting to take back and rebuild an entire city, rather than just collect 5 keys and get into a secret library. Well, yes, it is cool still, it doesn't really feel as important or interesting for that matter. And this game actually came out the same year as Assassin's Creed 3, which actually felt like it tried to change up a bit and didn't just rehash an old game. So why did this game happen again? Well, after years of trying to figure that out and actually going out and trying to figure it out myself, I've actually found the reason why. Finally, right? Some people have been wondering for years. I'm going to share it to you right now. Take it away. Me. Ever wondered why the man that was just talking to you is now wearing a hat, wearing sunglasses indoors, and is now speaking into his mobile phone, even though it is not even turned on? And have you ever wondered why that same man now has paint all over his face? But the real question here is, why did Ubisoft decide to make Assassin's Creed Revelations, even though it was clearly didn't need to be made and was made as blatant filler? Well, my friends, the answer to that question is just because. If you have any queries, feel free to contact us at 0800 just because. Someone is always ready to take your call. But seriously though, is this game blatant filler? Yes. Did it need to happen? No. Is it still enjoyable? Yeah. If you're playing through this game for the first time, I guess it could be fun. Maybe. But if you're looking to compare it to the other two games in the Ezio trilogy, my answer would be don't. It's just not worth your time. This game definitely feels like it got the least amount of attention and effort out of those three games, and it really does show. Which, yes, again, I'm gonna say it again, it feels like a lesser, watered down Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. It just doesn't really feel as fun. Which isn't saying much, because yes, Brotherhood is one of the best games in the series. But still, you would expect a bit more from its sequel. With all that being said, I can't brag on this game too hard, because seeing Ezio and Altair in the same game, while they don't interact with each other, it still feels like we're giving Altair a bit of closure, and still didn't really need to happen, but it's still nice because, you know, him in Assassin's Creed 1 basically has the personality of a robot, so it's nice that we gave him a little bit more attention. And plus the game's ending cutscene is probably one of the best cutscenes in the entire series. It still gives me some chills to this day, and I've seen it probably a million times. But all that being said, one cutscene isn't enough to save this game. And while it's not bad, it's definitely gotten more appreciated and more loved with time, but not enough to put it in the upper echelons with all the other greats like 2 and Brotherhood and some other games that we'll talk about later. But it's not terrible by any means. It's just average. So we're going to give it an average ranking. Assassin's Creed Revelations gets a 6.6 from me, which puts it in a still respectable B tier. Assassin's Creed 3. Again, I'm going to start by giving this game one word to describe it. And that word this time is overvalued. It's not that good. I'll start off by listing the game's strong points, which are the antagonists. The two main antagonists of this game, Haytham Kenway and Charles Lee, I would probably say are both in the top 3 best antagonists that the series has ever seen. And honestly, I think it's a shame that they were wasted on this game, because we'll talk about it later, but their counterpart, let's just say, isn't really up to par. And of course, the setting. This game is set in the colonies during the American Revolution, which I will probably say is the best setting in the classic Assassin's Creed games, and is something very, very intriguing for a game like Assassin's Creed. And I think they handle it very, very well. But let's get into the very, very, very obvious downside, and that is the protagonist. I think Connor Kenway has the personality of a stone. So picture this. You'll pass 3 games for the same person with endless charisma and intrigue, and makes players want to follow his story without even really asking them to this stone-faced, emotionless, downright boring character, which in comparison to Ezio, who shows endless range in his emotions, even in Revelations, to Connor, who I only think is only capable of showing 3 emotions: calm, angry, and more angry. The gameplay isn't really anything to write home about either, other than it's just typical Assassin's Creed. And while it does have a few naval combat missions sprinkled in there, they're not really all that important or exciting, and if you've ever played Assassin's Creed 4, then you'll forget about them right away, because, let's be honest, I think Assassin's Creed 4 spoiled us all with naval combat. I know I might even get death threats for this, but I think Assassin's Creed 3 is about as middle of the road as you can get It doesn't excel in anything. It has some very, very bad points, and it also has some very good points. But like I said, it doesn't excel in anything. And I mean, I played through the game twice, and I still don't see why some people like this game so much, but whether that's just me, that's just you. My final ranking for Assassin's Creed 3 is a 6.8 out of 10, which joins Revelations in B tier. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Gotta keep the fanboy levels to a minimum. I'm just gonna come out right out the gate and say this, just so you know what to expect. This game is not only my favourite Assassin's Creed game, but it's also my favourite video game of all time, period. This is the game where they finally shied away from that old, dated story formula, which was getting a bit stale by that point, and just thought, hey, pirates. This game excels in nearly everything. The location, the setting, the characters, the gameplay. There isn't one area where this game miserably fails in. This game is set in the Caribbean islands, and obviously it's based around pirates, which, if you don't think that's the coolest thing ever, then you might as well just click off this video now. I don't want you here. And I think it really, really captures the vibe and the essence of that setting and that time period perfectly. It makes you feel really immersed in that world. I'm starting on my words already, this is not good. I think this game's strongest point, however, has got to be its characters. This game has so many memorable characters, to the main protagonist, Edward Kenway, who is, I think, is the best protagonist in Assassin's Creed, fight me. He's like the Stone Cold Steve Austin of Assassin's Creed. And I mean, if that visual isn't making you laugh, then I don't know what will. So all the memorable side characters like Blackbeard and James Kidd, all of these characters aren't characters that you'll forget after you finish the game. And I think that's what they should do, because there's a lot of games, especially in the future games, where that character might be good in that game, but as soon as it's done, you forget all about them. Yusuf in Assassin's Creed Revelations is a very good example. And obviously the main selling point in the gameplay is the naval combat. It's a game based around pirates. If you don't go around sinking a few ships every now and again, you're doing it wrong. They massively added upon and fine-tuned the naval combat formula from Assassin's Creed 3 and made it actually feel fun and something you actually want to do. I know a lot of people will just fire up this game now just to sink a few ships, not to do missions. They just want to go sinking some ships because it's fun. And it also has a lot of the things that you would want from an Assassin's Creed game. Collectibles, memorable side missions, 2 hidden pieces of armor. The only real complaint I have about this game is, aside from the naval combat, the on-land missions, the structure of them, can get a bit repetitive. I mean, tailing and eavesdropping on an enemy is annoying the first time around, let alone the 48th, and that's really the only real complaint I have about this game. But a lot of time I'm so immersed in the atmosphere and the characters that I don't even realise how annoying it is. So this game earns its well-deserved place right at the top with a 9.6 out of 10 in S tier. Assassin's Creed Rogue. This game should have been amazing. I think the main problem with this game is, while yes, you are playing as a Templar, it doesn't really feel like you're playing as a Templar. It just feels like you're still playing as an assassin, just talking to different people and wearing different clothes. And the other main issue with this game is that it's just so short. It's only like 6 sequences long, so any of the new characters in this game, they didn't really get much time to shine, and they just kind of felt like they were there. They had their moments, especially the main protagonist, Shay Cormac. But again, the game is only like 6 sequences long, so I don't really get time to see what he can do as a character. And yeah, I'm still stuck on my words. The setting isn't really anything to write home about either, just because it feels so similar to Assassin's Creed 3. There's not really anything to talk about there either. The game honestly feels like a DLC to Assassin's Creed 4 rather than its own full game, which wouldn't really sound that bad if Assassin's Creed 4 wasn't amazing. but still you'd expect more from its own game. On top of the very weird fact, that when it first came out it was exclusive to the last gen consoles, even though the then and next gen consoles were already out, and it had to wait somewhat of like 5 years to get a remaster and put onto those consoles, means that a lot of people didn't even really get to experience it. And the fact that it was playing second fiddle to the worst game in the series, which, don't worry, we're going to get to soon, just means that it didn't really feel very important, and a lot of people didn't really take it seriously, and I'm willing to bet a lot of people actually forgot about it until I mentioned it just now. I think the one thing that this game does excel in, however, is that it tied a lot of loose ends in the story. This game takes place after Assassin's Creed 4, but before Assassin's Creed 3, so it takes place in the middle. So it ties up a lot of loose ends in that story from Assassin's Creed 3, like why is Achilles on a crutch, and why the Assassin Brotherhood is in shambles in Assassin's Creed 3, and also ties up a very loose end in the story thread of Assassin's Creed Unity, but let's be honest, I don't really think anyone cares about that. I wish I could rank this game higher, I really do, but in all fairness, it's so short and there's nothing really to write home about that I would want to put it in B tier, but it's just not long enough. It's like 6 sequences, so I have to put it a tier below, which kind of hurts me, kind of doesn't, because this game was a bit disappointing. So the final ranking is a 5.9 out of 10, which puts it nearer the top of C tier. Assassin's Creed Unity. This game hurts me. This has got to be the biggest misfire in the history of Assassin's Creed. Let's start by listing off all the negatives. Well, maybe not all the negatives, because we could be here all day, but let's off the general ones. If you played this game when it first came out at launch, you know that it was downright unplayable. Glitches and bugs and crashing issues literally made it unplayable. I'm not making that up. You literally couldn't play the game for a certain amount of time. And when you could play the game, you were even more upset with the awful gameplay, the annoying characters, the boring narrative, and the setting, which could have been cool and intriguing, takes a back seat to the narrative and the characters, and not in a good way either. In the way that you pay attention to it, hoping it'll get better and more intriguing and less annoying. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. If anything, it gets worse. I think the biggest issue for me with this game has got to be the characters. Let's start off with the main protagonist, Arno Dorian. If I could describe him in one sentence, it would be a washed down, just pound shop version of Ezio Auditore. And when you really pay attention to his personality and mannerisms, you can tell that Ubisoft were trying to catch that magic they got with Ezio. But it doesn't work like that. And I'll tell you why. Because Ezio is entertaining and intriguing. Arno Dorian is pompous and annoying. And let's take a look at the other side of the coin as well. Elise. I can't remember her last name, that's how memorable she was. Ubisoft trying to make them have some sort of Romeo and Juliet like story throughout the game. But it just doesn't work because those characters, one of them is just annoying and one of them is just boring. I want to take you back to Assassin's Creed Brotherhood in that string of side missions where Ezio interacts with Christina. Those are how you do a Romeo and Juliet story, because those are actually emotional and make you care about those two. And let's put it like this, when a string of about 4 or 5 side missions that are based around a side character that altogether are about 30 minutes long and create more emotion and intrigue than 2 main characters have when they have an entire game, says a lot. And the antagonists, what do I even say about the antagonists? They've got to be some of the worst. I mean, none of them are downright bad, it's just, I don't remember any of them, to be honest. Like, there's this one old dude that he was an assassin, and then he turned cold because he got jealous and hung for power. Who does that sound like? And let's not forget the biggest selling point of this game was the multiplayer. Remember that? So, show of hands, who actually cares about the multiplayer mode in any Assassin's Creed game, let alone this one? Both my hands are down. They hyped up the multiplayer for this game so much before launch. They are saying that it was actually going to be good this time around. They're actually going to put effort into it. I'm going to give you 3 guesses as to how well that turned out. I honestly think Ubisoft could have been sued for false advertising there, because it didn't feel like they changed or improved it at all. It still feels as empty and as boring as it always has. And combine that with the god-awful story mode, then there's no saving graces about this game. It's not like an Assassin's Creed Brotherhood situation, where the multiplayer is boring, but the story mode is amazing. No, they're just both boring. I'm going to wrap this section up before my head explodes. Assassin's Creed Unity gets a 2.2 out of 10, which puts it right at the bottom, where it belongs, in F tier. Right, glad that's over. What's the next game again? Let's just get this over with. Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Why did I agree to do this? I'm going to try not to rag on this game too long, because as much as I'd love to, this game doesn't really deserve that much attention. It ultimately just suffers from the same issues that Unity does. Bad characters, boring narrative, uninspiring gameplay with no real innovations. It's basically Unity 2 just set in London. You would think after the catastrophic dumpster fire that was Assassin's Creed Unity, we would be in for some good karma this time around. We would be in for a treat with the next year's game, right? No, you'd be wrong. Start by talking about the characters. I mean, the obvious glaring issue with the characters is one person in particular. I mean, anyone who's actually played the game will know exactly what I'm talking about. It is, of course, Henry Grigg. No, I'm kidding. It is, of course, Jacob Frye. And why is Jacob Frye so bad? Well, I've had to describe him as an English Arno Dorian. Not in the sense that he's more of a playboy, but in the sense that he single-handedly manages to make the narrative something that you don't even want to pay attention to, and something you'd rather just avoid. The main issue with him is, say if there's a serious scene going on, right? They use a serious tone to push forward that narrative. Jacob will just randomly come in and drop one of his stupid one-liners and just completely ruin the tone of that scene. So not only does that scene suffer, but then everything else after that is going to suffer, because how are we supposed to take that seriously when our main protagonist isn't taking it seriously? And also the gameplay. This game kind of suffers from the same thing that Revelations does, in the sense that none of it is downright terrible. It just didn't really do anything innovative and new, so it kind of got very boring very quickly. I will be ranking this game a bit higher than Unity though, just because of 3 things. 1, the setting. I think the setting for this game has got to be one of the best settings for an Assassin's Creed game you're ever going to get. It's Victorian London, I mean, come on. And 2, I know I said earlier that the gameplay isn't really all that, but one aspect that I did like, pretty much the only new aspect of the game, let's be honest, was the grapple gun. Not only did it make traversing the map more convenient and a bit less time consuming, but it also did really fit the time period. And 3, I don't usually talk about DLC, but I do actually think that the Jack the Ripper DLC for this game is probably one of the best DLCs in an Assassin's Creed game. Mainly because of 2 things. 1, Jacob is not featured in it pretty much at all. And 2, I mean, Jack the Ripper. That's all I'm gonna say. But those few little things aren't gonna save this game. It's still bottom of the barrel, one of the worst Assassin's Creed games you'll ever play. And if I have one message for you right now, never ever spend money on either Assassin's Creed Unity or Assassin's Creed Syndicate. They are both terrible and you will regret buying them both. So, with that being said, Assassin's Creed Syndicate gets a 2.5 out of 10. So it joins its ugly older brother in F tier. Assassin's Creed Origins. This is the good karma that we were waiting for. After the consecutive misfires of Unity and Syndicate, Assassin's Creed, the franchise, pretty much already had one foot in the grave. And Ubisoft needed something big to draw fans back in and gain their trust again. And let's just say, in my opinion, they definitely succeeded. And I mean big time. After years of releasing an Assassin's Creed game every single year, this time they decided to take an extra year off to obviously give this game a bit more development time. And I think it paid off. This game, however, was a completely different beast from all of the previous Assassin's Creed games. As obviously, well, you already know, they really changed up the formula of this game, making it more into an RPG-based game. So, pretty much pushing stealth out the window and focusing more on straight-up combat. And I know a lot of people really did not like these changes, but we'll pick up on that in a minute. I just want to get to the other reasons why this game is so good. Starting with the narrative and the characters. I think the only character that I really need to talk about here is the main protagonist, which is Bayek of Siwa. I'll start off by saying this: if there is one protagonist in an Assassin's Creed game that I would choose to get another game, it would be Bayek. Bayek is honestly everything you could really want from an Assassin's Creed character. He has the depth and personality of an Ezio or an Edward, and he has the intimidation factor of, say, a Connor Kenway. He's really, like I said, the best of both worlds, and he honestly carries the narrative of this game. Obviously not without some help, his wife Aya, and the plethora of side characters. Also, this game is set in Ptolemaic Egypt, so it already has a lot of value through that, location and time setting. Would mean, if you wanted to, you could go see the pyramids of Giza, or the Sphinx, you can go to the River Nile, you can go see the Library of Alexandria. It's all there. And obviously throughout the game, seeing as it's in Ptolemaic Egypt, you're going to see a lot of very famous historical figures that obviously you're going to recognize, namely Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. This game is way more than just something really pretty to look at though. This game doesn't completely rely on its setting, unlike its predecessor, Syndicate. Let's get back onto the gameplay. Like I said, this game is very much an RPG and took the classic Assassin's Creed formula and just threw it away, with the leveling up system and the loot system and stuff like that. But let's be honest, that old, dated formula just wasn't cutting it anymore. This game, for me, and for a lot of other people as well, is exactly what the series needed. A complete paradigm shift. Needed to shake up the formula so much that you didn't even recognize it anymore. It truly felt fresh. And that was something that Assassin's Creed couldn't do for the longest time. And I know a lot of people, pre-Origins, before it came out, were begging for change because the series was just getting too repetitive. But then those same people, when they got change, didn't like it, so you can't please everyone. And I know a lot of the positivity I'm giving to this game is going to annoy a lot of the purists, but I think if you've learned anything by now, is that I really do not care what the purists think. I think Assassin's Creed Origins is one of the best experiences you will ever get from an Assassin's Creed game, and is by far the best Assassin's Creed game since Black Flag, and that is a hill that I'm willing to die on. So if this game offers one of the best experiences that an Assassin's Creed game can offer, it's going to get one of the best rankings that an Assassin's Creed game can get. That being a 9.5 out of 10. Which also means it's going to get one of the best placings that an Assassin's Creed game can get, from me anyway. Which puts it at a well-deserved S tier. Come on, it saved the franchise. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. This one should be interesting. This game has without a doubt got to be the most divisive game in the series. It seems like it's kind of split right down the middle with the community. Half the people seem like they love or at least like it, and then the other half seem like they absolutely hate it. And I don't think that's the same with any other game in the series, so we might be on this game for a little while. This game very much copied a lot of the gameplay formula and mechanics from Origins, with a few minor differences here and there. So pretty much any negatives and positives I said about that, just copy and paste here. Let's start off with the first real issue of the game, and it's a pretty obvious one. It's the fact that it's not really an Assassin's Creed game. Assassin's Creed Odyssey takes place in Greece during the Peloponnesian War between Sparta and Athens. And Assassin's Creed Origins takes place in Ptolemy, Egypt. And the Assassin Brotherhood was formed at the end of Assassin's Creed Origins, hence why it's called Origins. And if you know your history, which I don't, but I played the game so I don't need to, you would know that the Peloponnesian War takes place before that. So, in the timeline, the effects of Origins take place after the events of Odyssey. And if the Assassin Brotherhood was formed in Origins, and we're going back further than that, that basically means that you have an Assassin's Creed game without the assassins, which is basically like having a Batman game without Batman. This game makes you follow the path of a mercenary rather than an assassin, doing things like trying to find your long lost mother after fleeing Sparta as a child, and winning a wreath in the Olympics for Sparta, getting involved in Athenian politics, trying to take down a mystical cult, trying to take over the Greek world. That last one is a bit more sinister than the first three, but what I'm getting at is this game does feel more like an Odyssey rather than an Assassin's Creed game. I think the other minor issue that I find with this game is while you do have the choice to select between two characters right at the start of the game, and not like Syndicate where you play as both, the person that you pick at the start is the one that you are stuck with throughout the entire game. There's one male and one female, but the issue here is that the game plays out the exact same way no matter which one you pick. So it really comes across as a lazy excuse to give you an option, rather than giving you a reason to play as both characters, by giving each character its own unique story, which would make the game much more replayable. But the saving grace for this game, and it's a pretty big one to be honest, is that if you forget that it's an Assassin's Creed game, it's actually very, very fun. Which I know sounds bad, that you have to forget that you're playing an Assassin's Creed game, but since it doesn't feel like an Assassin's Creed game at all, it's actually pretty easy to do. While the story and characters may be not lacking, but definitely pale in comparison to that of Origins, there's still enough to get you through the game without wanting to put your head through a wall, unlike a certain other two games that we've talked about. And another big saving grace for this game is the setting. It's ancient Greece. Again, like with Origins, there's so many things that you can do that really complement that setting and time period. You can go to Athens and Sparta, obviously. You can go see all the beautiful scenery around it. And since I don't know my history, I don't really know of a lot of historical locations in Greece, but you get the idea. And it really caters to all of the various Greek gods. And you can even fight a lot of them as well. Including, of course, Medusa herself, which, I mean, I'm a big fan of. And on the topic of DLC once again, The DLC for this game really does add so much to it, like it should. There are 2 DLC packs for this game. The first one, Legacy of the First Blade, to be honest, is a complete disaster. I would get into it, but that will be its own separate video. So we're just going to push that to the side and leave it as it is. The second DLC, however, is where it gets interesting. This DLC is called The Fate of Atlantis, which that name in itself should already intrigue you in. It has 3 completely separate episodes, and each episode you're set in a different mythical location, so it really does cater to that ancient Greek setting. This first one, we are running freely through the beautiful fields of Elysium, which is about as beautiful as you'd think it would be if you know anything about it. And then the second one takes a complete 180 to Hades' realm, which is obviously the Greek interpretation of hell. Then the last one, you finally get to go to Atlantis itself. And all along the way, you're meeting all these different mythological gods, like Persephone, Hades himself, Poseidon, Hermes Trismegistus. All of these different characters just give it this flair. Because obviously you've read about these characters, you kind of know of them vaguely, but now they're there in front of you. Well, not really, but they're there in front of your character, so yeah. And I'm gonna make a bold statement here. The combat of this game is probably my favourite combat in any Assassin's Creed game. It's so much more arcadey with the amount of different abilities you can get, and it makes it so much more fun and replayable. And I will not let anyone tell me that the combat in Odyssey is worse than the combat of old, with you just spamming the attack button with the hidden blade until the enemy eventually dies. That's purest talk right there. So this game does have some very noticeable flaws, but it also has some very noticeable upsides if you're willing to actually accept them. But seeing it does have a good amount of flaws, and it doesn't really feel like an Assassin's Creed game at all, I can't put it in S tier with its counterpart, Origins. But what I can do is give it an 8.8 out of 10. So it joins Assassin's Creed 2 in A tier. Alright, so here is the final list. So put it in this corner so I can talk. Now again, remember, if you don't agree with any of those rankings, feel free to go down to the comments and tell me what a hairy idiot I am, because Assassin's Creed Unity got such a low ranking that it totally didn't deserve. It did. And since I don't have an outro, I'm just going to cut it off right here.